Hi, and welcome to another Forest Service web tutorial. My name is Mariana Dobre, and I'm a research scientist at University of Idaho, working on the development side of WEPPcloud. In this video, we'll talk about running multiple management scenarios and about duplicating a watershed. Now that we've seen how to run the WEPPcloud interface and interpret the results, we can run multiple scenarios. The easiest way is to run one simulation, let's say an undisturbed or a wildfire simulation, and then duplicate the model run, rebuild the managements and the soils, and then rerun the watershed. This will allow you to run watersheds with the same number of hill slopes and channels, so you can also compare the results of applying different management treatments by individual hill slopes. Since we already looked at the results with the wildfire simulation, then let's start with this model run and duplicate or fork the run several times. When you duplicate a watershed, the model will copy all the inputs, outputs, and any selections you've made for that watershed to the new run. I will duplicate this watershed 5 times, as I would like to run 5 management scenarios. Undisturbed, thinning at an 85% residual ground cover. This is the ground cover that is left on the ground after the treatment. Thinning at 96% residual ground cover, prescribed fire, and the uniform high severity fire. To remember which run is which, we can rename the runs. Let's start with the undisturbed model run. We remove the soil burn severity, and then we build the land use and the soils. We see that most of the watershed is covered by evergreen forest and a small percentage by shrubs. Now we have replaced the wildfire managements and the soils to undisturbed conditions, and we can now run the WEPP model. For the thinning treatment, remove the soil burn severity map and build the land use to see the types of land covers. Our watershed has only 2 land covers, forest and shrub. Now we can change both of these land covers to thinning, but realistically, we would not thin the areas covered by shrubs, so we will only apply the thinning management to the forested hill slopes. After changing the management, proceed with building the soils. You don't need to rebuild the climates or select any other parameters, since these are already copied from the original run. Now we can just run WEPP. And similarly for the other thinning scenario. For the prescribed fire scenario, we can actually apply the treatment to both the forest and the shrubs, since both can theoretically burn. We will replace the forest management to a prescribed fire management and the shrub to a shrub prescribed fire management. Next is the high severity fire scenario. Similarly, remove the soil burn severity map and build the land use. Just like with a prescribed fire, both the forested areas and the shrub areas can burn, although they will not all burn at a high severity. But as an exercise, let's burn all hill slopes uniformly. I will change forest to a high severity and shrubs to a shrub high severity. Then build soils and rerun WEPP. Once all models are done running, we can actually compare the results. Let's start with the Undisturbed Model Run. If we now open the Watershed Loss Summary, we see that the total hill slope soil loss is 58 tons per year, and the sediment discharge at the watershed outlet is 850 tons per year. The 850 tons per year seems high to me, especially for a small watershed. We can reduce this value by increasing the channel critical shear, but since this is a demonstration on model functionalities rather than a model assessment, I will continue with whatever the model is predicting with the default values. We can now copy the table to an Excel spreadsheet and do the same for all the other scenarios. Once you have all the results in the Excel spreadsheet, you can compare sediment yield from all the scenarios. Ideally, before you run all the scenarios, you want to make sure that your undisturbed results make sense. Like I mentioned, if I was to really have to analyze the web results for this watershed, then I would first make sure the climate file is representative of the area, and then I would tweak the soil channel parameters to make sure I'm not over or underestimating the channel sediment yield. And then I would run all the scenarios. But I could also calculate sediment yield for each treatment as percent increase from undisturbed conditions, and then the absolute values would not matter as much. Most users, especially those involved with land and water management, have an idea of the erosion rates that are typical in their own watersheds. So each user should use their own judgment when making parameter selection in WEPPcloud and when interpreting the model results. This concludes our video on duplicating a watershed and running multiple scenarios.